So good to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And I think you drove up this morning from Fort Lauderdale, so kind of in your backyard.
Backyard, yeah, this is great.
So
this place.
Let's talk about Miami. I mean, it feels like all eyes are on Miami right now. We've had a bit of a lull in the racing action. This is kind of Cadillac's home field. This feels like very much a debut. Tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about the race going into the weekend and what it means for Cadillac to be here.
Yeah, I mean, there has been this lull in Formula One. We didn't race in April, and so everyone's been preparing for this moment. So it kind of almost puts the Miami race in a different posture. We're back racing again. It's so important, and this is such an important race. But for Cadillac, this is our first time to race on U.S. soil. New team, first race in the U.S. We couldn't be more excited about that. With chance to continue to connect with U.S. fans and then show them what the new Cadillac Formula One team looks like.
Tell me a little bit about the fan activation you've got going on. You mentioned it. I know it's a huge deal. I think it's free for everybody. Yep. How did this concept come up? Why is it so important for Cadillac to have something that is free and accessible to everyone in the city this weekend?
Yeah, with all the excitement around Formula One, we want to make sure that it's the entertainment's accessible, that building communities, as we think about how do we grow Formula One, how do we grow the fan base in the U.S., how do we grow the fan base for Cadillac, and it really starts with building community around that, and so giving people access to the team to see what Cadillac's about, access to the drivers.
Are the drivers going to be there at some point?
They might.
Okay.
They might.
I mean, if you want to say any dates or times, you can let us know.
Yeah. So it's, but yeah, it's really exciting to be able to do that, here in Miami, and everything that Cadillac is doing as well. It's just, it's an exciting activation for us.
So that old saying, race on Sunday, sell on Monday, or win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Is that true? Is that kind of what you're getting at, that like all of this feeds into selling Cadillac cars necessarily, or is this more about the motorsport?
This is really about the motorsport. I mean, we're building a fan base for Cadillac Formula One
racing.
For the Formula One team. Obviously, if we do a great job of that, I think it will impact the auto brand, the car brand, and sell cars. But that's not the goal of the team. The goal of the team is to perform on Sunday, and we want to build a fan base at the same time we're doing that.
So on the other end, also Miami is a very expensive, glamorous, very sexy place to be. What is Cadillac doing to also tap into that type of person who wants to come here and have a really major weekend?
Yeah, so we have exclusive parties and special dinners set up throughout the weekend. A big event tomorrow night, and so really for us, we want to check all the boxes. We want to be able to provide that premium elite experience, the VVIP experience, but at the same time, have that accessibility that builds community in the fan base.
And we talked a little bit upstairs about your drivers. You really have, between Valtteri and Checo, these are kind of the two best personalities in racing, maybe. Tell us a little bit about how they provide value. Obviously, they're driving on the track, but what's the value that they provide off the track? It's kind of like an odd couple in a way.
It really is. Their personalities are so different. Valtteri's dry and kind of crazy, and some of the stunts and things that he does. They're both, but it really starts with they're both, absolutely dead serious about racing. They are here to race. And it was their experience in the car, that drove our choice, to choose them. It was at the British Grand Prix a year ago when it rained, and I say that thinking we don't know what the forecast looks like for this weekend.
Can't control the weather. Yeah.
And you just saw experience rise to the top. The young guys struggled with how much rain was on track, and it really just showed us the value of experience in Formula One. And so having those two alongside, but it really is an odd couple, type, and we put them in a lot of different situations. They've had to eat hot wings and
who won in the hot wings test?
Not the one you would expect.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and again, Valtteri just went all in. He was taking the biggest bites, and I think from what I hear, he suffered on the way home.
I'm not going to ask for more details on that. So that's great because, sometimes we hear about all these young drivers doing really well on track, and of course, that is also true. But it's nice to know that there is something to be said for experience, for more of a veteran mentality. And also Sergio, of course, has a huge fan base in Mexico and beyond. I have to imagine that's a big growth market that you see for Cadillac. Is that true, and are there other ones that you're identifying too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Checo has a huge fan base. They stop us, all over the world in places you wouldn't expect, which is, just absolutely fantastic. Because at the end of the day, you love the passion.
Is that what it is? Is that why he's so? It's just the passion.
Well, it's what he means to Mexico, what he means to the Mexican people, and so they love to support Checo and wherever he's at, and so that certainly is huge from that community standpoint. But the fact that the drivers have a following is, again, is part of starting that fan base. Everything with Cadillac Formula One team is starting, from the ground up, and so continuing to build the fan base with, with what we have with Checo and Valtteri is a huge compliment to the team. But again, the reason we picked them is, we're building a team. We brought a lot of experienced people in that are racing the car for the first time, and so you need like a quarterback of sorts that's helping to gel the team, the feedback, developing the car, and working as a singular unit in Formula One. And just the progress, the change, the development that I've seen from Melbourne through Suzuka has just been impressive, and been very happy with how the team has progressed. We now have a month off, so we have to see what's going to happen in Miami. The team's been working really hard. Like a lot of other teams, we've got big updates that are coming, that are going to be on the car, and so we'll see how it shakes out over the weekend.
Well, I was going to ask this later, but I'll ask it now because we're kind of going there. Obviously, we've seen the news about General Motors making engines for you guys in 2029, which I don't know if saying it's a gamble is too big of a word, but that there could be more changes coming in the next few years after that. But it seems like it's very important for you and for the team to have an American beating heart in that car, basically. Why is that so essential, especially because it's a huge investment and you might have to change it again?
I mean, this team was really founded out of national pride, that the U.S. have a seat at the table, and that meant all the way across the board. We want to create pathways for American drivers. That doesn't mean that there's earmarked seats for Americans, but we want to make sure that there's a clear pathway for that. We want to have the American-built, design-built power unit in the car as well. And so we're going to have the U.S. headquarters in Indianapolis, and power units are going to be built in Charlotte. We'll have some 600,000 square feet of manufacturing space under roof. There's a huge commitment to infrastructure. And then we're talking about, how do we develop talent? Partnerships with universities and things to develop Formula One talent in the U.S. so that in the future it's a place to be. And so we're looking to redefine what it means to be an American team in Formula One.
That is really exciting to hear that you are building an ecosystem here. And it's not just about having a brand on a car. This is a from the ground up ecosystem. I'll ask the same question Matt asked Susie earlier. How many years in advance are we looking before we might expect to see an American driver on this American team?
Well, look, we're going to have an American driver racing in F2 this weekend, Colton Herta, who's been a winner in IndyCar. And Colton has shown really strong aptitude for Formula One. He's learning tracks and tires and going through the process. And so there's someone in the wings. There's a long list of development drivers who have potential as well. So it could be soon, but who knows? A Formula One seat has to be earned. It's never given.
It's interesting to hear. I know you played baseball in your past. You really have a wide sporting history. And of course, TWG has oversight over a lot of different sporting teams and leagues. What is the connective tissue here that also now includes Formula One? And how has it been for you in this new field of F1 when you have a huge sporting background and a lot of other things as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you look across those, sports gives us that live entertainment, and so there's, there's huge value in that, and the growth in Major League Baseball or the NBA, has been incredible. We look at the success of the Dodgers, and I think so across the TWG ecosystem, that is the benchmark. Right?
The Dodgers? The Dodgers are the benchmark.
It's an incredibly high benchmark.
I live in LA, so I accept that. I'm happy.
Yeah, back-to-back World Series. And so, but again, I think what we look at in each place is, really trying to, you want to have the resources, you want to have the culture, It's attracting the talented people, both on the field or participating in the sport, as well as in the back office. We're just trying to build the best teams we can. These are premier brands. So we think about the Dodgers, Lakers, Cadillac Formula One team. These are premier names in sports, and so putting all that together is a powerful combination. And and there's collaboration across each of those teams. Certainly from a commercial standpoint, to say how can a rising tide lift all boats across that ecosystem. So
potentially you would give like the Dodgers treatment to Cadillac. Is that what you're saying? In terms of your role, your job?
Yeah. So we're trying to bring the best resources to to build it up. Like the U.S. headquarters will be the first class premier F1 headquarters. We're not just trying to show up and look like every other team.
Yeah.
We want to build the Formula One team for the next generation, and so taking the steps now to do that.
What do you think have been the things stopping an American team or an American driver up till now? Is it just about someone with a lot of money deciding, I want an American team and I'm going to build it? Because it's been tried.
I think it's a tough road, right? It means like somewhere between the ages of 6 and 10, you're moving to Europe and racing in the lower series, and and spending most of your the latter part of your childhood in Europe. Looking to, fighting to get that chance. It's super expensive, and so without the right backing, without the right sponsor, it can be definitely a long road. I mean, there have been others in the past who have done it, so it's not like they're, haven't been American drivers. But
sure.
But again, I think with what we're trying to do to bring Formula One to the U.S., not just have the U.S. go to Formula One, we want to continue to, create that excitement, to develop drivers that, that's their young, kids who want to be Formula One drivers. As an American, like, I want to drive in Formula One. What do I have to do that? And so to create that pool of talent, because it's such an elite sport. There are so few drivers, 22 drivers that have a seat across the entire motorsport ecosystem. And so how do we make sure that young Americans have that opportunity to develop and have a chance at one of those seats?
And hopefully maybe some of the people that go to the fan zone will get a glimpse of, oh, this is accessible. I can start to see the thread that takes me toward getting involved.
Yeah, I mean, similar to the last conversation with Susie. I mean, I think it starts with sowing those seeds of belief. Mm-hmm. As a young person, do you see yourself? Do you aspire to that? Because if you don't, there's a good chance you won't get there. Sure. And so you want to create that opportunity and that belief and the inspiration to do so. To kids of a very young age, to create that possibility.
So let's talk about this season. I've seen some of your comments. You've likened building an F1 team from scratch to basically sailing a ship while you're building it, or building a ship while you're sailing it. Talk to me about what have been the biggest surprises for you this year. What are the challenges, and what are you hoping to implement even in this race compared to previous races?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many complex work streams that are happening at the same time. Building a car is no joke. Designing it, and we're designing it without on-track data. So this is a car that's built from a computer, and so the team's done an amazing job with that from that standpoint. And then we've got, like, even if you think of HR, so we add 50 people a month. How do you build a culture when
add 50 people a month onboarding to the team?
Yeah, so you think of so today there's around 600 employees in the organization. So at different stages across the year, you've got 10 to 30% of your, depending on what stage we're talking about, of your organization, is changing month in and month out. How do you build a culture around that? And then you want to have even like things like HR, like just the retention and creating a place where the best of the best want to come work. That's its own challenge. There's a real estate development project. We've been hard at work building the operations in Silverstone, building the headquarters in Indianapolis, and the power unit plant, in Charlotte. And when you think of the size and scale of just the real estate project alone, it's big and it's daunting. And so, assembling all those pieces, and then in the early stages, right, just like any other business, it's all hands on deck. The coffee machine shows up and it's boxed up. Who's going to unbox it? Who's going to put it out?
Are you saying you've unboxed a coffee machine, an espresso machine?
I might have.
Yeah. Someone's got to do it.
It's the fuel that keeps us going, right? And so you start with things like that, but then the organization has to evolve. The organization has to turn into policies, procedures, precision, all these things that happen so that you have robust process to develop these cars and compete at the highest level of sport. Like that's not done with kind of ad hoc. So it's almost like something has to evolve from Jimmy's garage to NASA, in a very short period of time. And how do you do that while you're also producing the very goods that you're talking about? In theory, something of this scale and scope should take years and years to develop.
It has taken years for all these other teams.
Yeah,
I mean, they've got
we got our entry in March of last year.
So what is Cadillac F1 racing culture?
It's grit, right? It's our culture is we're this underdog culture that that's exceeding expectations. People say, you won't get the car to Barcelona, and we did. We completed all the laps there and in Bahrain. And then it's like, well, you'll get to Melbourne, but maybe it doesn't. The car doesn't move when the lights go out. It did. You won't be within the 107% of the rule for qualifying. We were well inside of that, and we're competing against other teams, and we're beating other teams even as we start. And so I think across the paddock, we've exceeded expectations of what people thought was possible. Now, having said that, I also see the perspective that was set along the way. I'm like, as I've walked through the factory, I'm like, I'm glad I didn't know just how complicated. I didn't know we had to build this. If I'd have known that back then, I would have been much more intimidated, by what we set out to do. Because it's incredibly complex, but couldn't be more proud of the work that this team has done, and even just seeing the rate of growth. Because for us right now, it's that rate of progress, for the team of how we're going to improve each week, how quickly are we catching up, to really start to race more and more teams week in and week out.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what indicators are you looking? Obviously, I don't think Cadillac is expected to win the series this year, but there are other indicators to look at that would indicate you're moving towards success. It seems like you've listed a few. Are there other things? Obviously, scoring a point would be good. What standard are you holding yourself to that let you know you're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it's really just looking at the rate of progress and the gap to to the key competitors that we have mapped out in the shop.
Who are those key competitors?
Yeah, well, we'll keep that to ourselves for now.
All right.
But that's a Cadillac secret. But certainly keeping track of that and what that rate of progress is week in and week out. Just how the teams are working together, the quality of the car build. Continuing to develop the relationship with Ferrari as we're using a Ferrari power unit right now. Yeah. And so, all of those things are really key to improving that performance.
Yeah, and it seems like as you move forward, Cadillac is really gaining momentum with the fans, if nothing else. As you're going into this weekend, is there anything that we should all be watching that you think would indicate where Cadillac's headed in the future?
I don't know if there are external factors. I think this is really a bottoms-up approach. I think, again, we've got a great group of partners and VIP guests that are coming in. We've got community-building events, as we're looking across. People just, a few blocks away in Jungle Plaza that'll be able to watch qualifying, and the race, in a Cadillac fan zone this weekend. And so all of those things, certainly point towards building up the fan base. We've got a special livery. We designed a special livery that is still within the black and white scheme, but it pays homage to the Stars and Stripes.
Oh, very cool.
But at the same time, we're a brand new team, so we didn't want to have a livery that's such a departure that people for the first time aren't seeing what our car really looks like. And so this was a clever way to blend the two together.
Okay, so last question as we close down. What does this mean for you on a personal level? Just to be here, it's already been a long journey, you said, from when you started and now you're here. Can you just give us some reflections on what it means to be here and what this weekend specifically will mean for you?
Yeah, I think for me personally, this first race on U.S. soil is incredibly meaningful. This was a dream that started over 4 years ago to get into Formula One. It was a long road. There were many days where it didn't look like it was even possible, and all we heard was no, and we had to turn the no into not yet, and build and build and build. And so to finally be here, but it's not a destination. The goal wasn't to get to Miami. It's really just the beginning of what we plan to do. But to be able to plant the flag here in Miami for our first U.S. race, Miami race is so spectacular. And so to be able to do that here, you know, it's incredibly meaningful, and this is a big, big weekend for Cadillac Formula One.
Well, we're so happy that you chose to spend some time with us today. Thank you, Dan Towriss.
Thank you.